Welcome. Welcome to Wharton Moneyball. Welcome to a full hour of sports analytics here on the Wharton Podcast Network. This is Cade Massey hosting this week with 2/3 of my colleagues, but the third is on the way. Eric Bradlow is here already. He's on the 7th floor of Huntsman Hall, Wharton campus. I can tell. Shane's at home. I'm at home. Adi is on his way home at the moment. We'll be in here for the next hour talking sports analytics. We usually are most weeks of the year, coming up on 12 years. We are a mere, less than 2 months now from our 12-year anniversary, hitting probably average of 48 or 49 weeks a year. We got sports. We're going to talk about sports. We got some analytics. We're going to talk about analytics. Right now, we're going to do a regular show. We've got a guest here in the first half hour. We'll go open lines in the second half hour. Here, peak football. Really peak football. We've got college football going to culminate a week from now, a week from last night. This is Tuesday. Show will go up Wednesday. Next Monday, college football championship. We'll talk about that in a sec. And of course, we trimmed the NFL playoff field a little bit over the weekend. 3 days of NFL games. Good fun. Got it down to the quarterfinals. Who can talk to us about both college football and professional football and any other lingering things we want to talk about? Who better than our old friend Neil Payne? Neil Payne, good afternoon to you. Welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me back, guys.
Always delighted to have you. Neil looks like he's calling from home, which is Arkansas, Bentonville. I want to say Bentonville, Arkansas. Is that right? Close? Almost?
Good memory.
All
Yeah.
right.
No, I'm always calling from home these days. Home is the office.
Home is the office. Neil's blending. Neil, what are you thinking about this this Tuesday morning when, for our show, but also kind of in general? Neil, we should say, runs one of the best Substacks in sports. You should subscribe to Neil's daily Substack. He's going to do something interesting every day. From the first time we met Neil back in the beginning of the show, it was like, hold on, it's not fair. This guy, he's good with numbers and words, and he still does that on a regular basis. Neil writes for ESPN. He writes for NASCAR. He writes for the Washington Post. He was one of the originals. He's an OG 538er. So he's done the work and he's still doing the work, and you should sign up and listen to him. Neil, what are you thinking about today?
Well, I had something up on Tuesday morning just about what we could take away from the wild card round. I usually try to do those little editorial behind the curtain look. Would love to do those on Monday coming out of a weekend because it gives me a chance to kind of digest things on a Sunday. And the Monday night wild card extra thing that they added a few years ago messes with that a little. So I had to find something else to put on the docket for Monday. But then Tuesday got your traditional coming out of the weekend takeaways. And I think one of the big things on my mind and a lot of people's mind, it got spoiled a little bit by the fourth quarter of that Texans-Steelers game. But just how close the games were, how many comebacks there were, and just sort of back and forth battles. And I saw, most people were happy about this. And I was, as a fan, just, thought it was amazing television. I'm sure you guys would agree as well. But I saw some people being like, man, when it comes down to this, like, can we really say that the best team won in these games? Because if it's just going to be a coin flip, if it's just going to be about who kind of has the last possession, or if it's sort of a 50-50 at the end, are we really getting the results that tell us who the best teams are? And I think that presumes a lot about what the purpose of playoffs are. They're there to entertain us, and are we not entertained by what we saw? But I thought that was interesting. I thought I'd kind of pose it to you guys, what you think about that argument, almost sort of like, was it too much of a good thing in terms of the excitement?
Well, does it speak a little bit to the parity? I think. I mean, I think we do have there. I keep thinking about the fact that there's really kind of not teams that seem particularly dominant right now. Rolling into the playoffs, obviously the Eagles and the Chiefs were kind of both rolled in with crazy winning streaks. And I guess the Texans technically have a big winning streak, but don't really seem like an insurmountable force. So it speaks to me kind of to the parity of both the wild card round, and even now that we're to the divisionals and the number one seeds are in it, I still think the games are very, I wouldn't put that many games far off 50-50 in my mind.
Yeah, maybe I'll jumping in here. when I reflect back on all of the games, I'm not convinced the better team didn't win. I guess the one you could argue with, Neil, maybe you would have a different opinion, would be the Packers-Bears game. You could argue that the Packers led for such a long period of time. But on the other hand, it wasn't like they committed 3 turnovers in the last 10 minutes of the game either. They just went 3 and out, and they play 60-minute games in pro football, not shorter games than that. Nothing surprised me. I was at the Eagles game. I do think the better team won that game, and that's even a injured 49er team. I think the better team won that game. So I don't look at anything. The only one I would potentially make an argument for was the Packers potentially being a better team than the Bears. Like, and what does it even mean, by the way? Like, from a statistical sense, do you mean if we could replay the game a large number of times, how many times would the other team win under, some scenario like that? I don't think any of the games, maybe to Shane's point also, if that's the replication we're talking about, except for Houston, Pittsburgh, which I think that game would end up the same 85% of the time.
The same outcome, not the same score, the same winner.
Same outcome, yes, same outcome. I think the other 5 games were all within that band of margin of error.
I think, by the way, I think the post-game win expectancy, the team that won was positive on that, except for Buffalo. These vary, of course. The one I saw, I forget whose it was, Buffalo was just below 50%. So they were the one team who won, who didn't play in a way that would have suggested they won, but even they were almost that close. Adi was trying to get in.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that I think comes to mind as analysts, in some level, we've added a dimension to sports that has pulled it down by analyzing it through the lens of probability models, which forces you to ask, is this an estimation question? Are we inferring from the season and then the playoffs who has the highest parameter? And we're just trying to get that decision correct, like we're decision theorists. And I think, Neil, you're pointing it out that that's not exactly the point. This is an athletic competition, and we give the prize to the team that actually won. It's an interesting question that we can ask ourselves going forward, who would win if they got to do this repeatedly, as Eric just did. But is there even randomness in sports the way we analyze it that way because it's the only tool that we have at our disposal? But does a team win because there was an underdog, or does a favorite lose because of just bad luck, or did they lose because they didn't execute when it needed to get done, and they should lose because of that? I'm not saying that if we had to do it again, they would be more likely to do the right thing, but they didn't get it done when it needed to get done, and there's got to be some reward for that. And I think we as analysts have turned people's attention away from that with measures like WAR, for example, in various sports that use it, which takes away from doing it when it counts.
Just to be clear, what you're talking about hypothetically, and Neil's going to, I assume, jump in on this too, is a memoryless replication. So it's not like the Packers get to say, well, we blew that 21-point lead or whatever. Let's play it differently this time. No, you're talking about
memoryless. Parallel universe, we like to say.
Here, right? There's the randomness of like kind of the within team heterogeneity. Like, I guess if we are kind of thinking about this as a parameter, is it like a fixed parameter, or is it like something where a team's kind of latent performance is a random draw from its distribution? And what we're really interested in, if the two teams are better, is there a difference in those two distributions of the team's performance? But then, even if you kind of were able to observe that, there's on top of it the kind of in-game randomness of
that's right,
how things happen.
Right. But let's I think Neil's question, y'all dove in kind of the middle. I'm gonna go high and low. At a high level, it's like, hell no, there's not too much randomness and too much chance. And hell no let's real decidedly answer that. Hell no, we'll take that all day long. But there's also a tournament design question. And of course, we also we love to turn to tournament design when we can. And we're watching college football play it out in front of us, and we have over our lifetimes, where they used to just vote. They just watched 11 games played and then voted on who they thought was the best. That was just who's got the highest alpha, or the whatever parameter you want to say, who's highest theta. And then that's too much of us deciding. Let's let one game decide it. And they did that for a few years. And then, no, let's let 3 games decide. Let's choose 4 teams. And they're slowly expanding And they're saying we're more and more going to let this thing be decided on the field. And I think the more you do that, the more you allow chance to come into play, obviously, because you're not just going to sit back as analysts and say, who's the highest theta and let these two high thetas play each other. You're saying anything can happen. And here's Miami, the last team in the field playing for the national championship. And 2 years ago, Ohio State, or was it last year? Ohio State comes in as whatever 8 and won the national championship.
They were an 8 seed. In fact, it was an 8 versus a 7 in the championship last year with Notre Dame and Ohio State. This year, it's kind of the two extremes of the spectrum. The 10 seed in Miami, which was really kind of the last quote unquote real team. And no offense to Tulane, no offense to James Madison, but they got in through maybe different means. And then Indiana, who of course seems like this just unstoppable juggernaut. We'll kind of see what happens in that game. But to your point, yes, it does introduce randomness and similar to the NFL. But I think the college playoff, it feels a little less random just because we've seen the margins be, it wasn't down to the wire. Some of the games were, all the Ole Miss games, I feel like, were on different levels. But then many of the games were very lopsided, to which point you might be able to make a case that a smaller playoff than the 12 was justified because you had a lot of teams that were just sort of not competitive, not just Tulane and James Madison, but also some of the other teams just came out, Oregon beat Texas Tech 23-0, and then they turn around and get blown out by Indiana. Alabama, of course, loses 38-3, which is one of the most ridiculously lopsided games Alabama's ever been on the receiving end of. So I think in some ways, you look at that's a little bit different than the NFL, right? Where it's like anybody could win. Here, it's like, there's really only a core group of teams. We just didn't necessarily know who the core group was. Like, you would have put Texas Tech ahead of Miami in any kind of ranking going into the playoff, but it's pretty clear that they belong, where they are more so than some of the teams that got knocked out.
That's
earlier.
right. That's right. Well, so two quick things here. You're right. No question. College versus pro, especially this year, the parity is stronger. The matches are closer on the NFL side. But the other thing that's going on in this tournament design with college is you're deciding how much is deservingness versus how much is the best team. And best team is just, you're gonna take a team like Ohio State who had 2 losses and put them in at 8 seed, and if they play their way through, they're the best team. And if Miami plays their way to the championship, that's the best team. They weren't the most deserving teams in the field, but by broadening the field, you go deeper, and you're necessarily pushing it up from deserving to the best. Where they used to just pick 2 teams, they're picking the 2 most deserving at the time. But so they've broadened it over time.
I also think for the tournament design part of it is, you're trying to like to Neil's kind of comment that like maybe we didn't need maybe it's almost like too big or whatever. We don't need that extra round. What you're trying to do is on average in the future, project on average what the distribution of talented teams at the top is going to be.
Yeah, Shane.
And
That's
some years it's like 1 or 2, you got it. That's definitely those teams. Other years it's like 8.
Shane, that's what the guys who run college football are doing. They're modeling distributions of talent, and they're trying to pick the number of playoff teams. They're trying to pick the number of playoff teams that would extract the most entertainment from those. That's exactly how they're deciding how to do this. Adi,
I just want to add a little comment here. You use the word best as if the purpose of the tournament is to find out who's the best. Is that really true? I asked that rhetorically.
No, I said best versus deserving. There's always this tension in college football, best versus deserving.
Who do we call we call the winner of the tournament the champion? We don't call them the best. We call them
the 100%.
And we have to be clear on that. That the purpose of the team that wins is the championship, is not necessarily the most deserving on the field or whatever it is.
Every sport,
they're the winner.
Every sport, every season of all sports are littered with great teams that didn't win their national championships. By the way, one last note on differencing this and tournament design. There's a fundamental difference, and now this is being debated in college, on how the tournament is seeded or how the tournament is populated. And let's just note the general in tournament design, you've got a qualifying stage and then you've got the knockout stage. And we know this that's the language we use in World Cup, but the same thing happens. Baseball, it's 162 games of qualifying and then a few weeks of knockouts. And in NFL, the qualifying happens by divisions, and the champs go. Even if you're a 8-9 or whatever the hell Carolina was this year, you're going to play. And the wild cards are a way to take the edge off of that, but it's this automatic qualifying. In college, there's a little bit of automatic qualifying, but there's debates on that's exactly what they're debating right now. Next week is the meeting. We're going to expand the tournament probably. Are we going to put in more automatic qualifiers or just a few and let people come in the other way? This NFL solved this problem years ago, and we don't debate who should be in the playoffs or not. It's like it's agreed upon. This is how it happens. You play divisions matter, and it's kind of nice in that way. Really, there's no committee deciding which of the NFL teams should be
more
in the
balanced.
Well, everyone plays, roughly equivalent schedules, which I think helps in the NFL compared with college.
Hugely so. Okay, Neil, you're wearing a Buffalo Bills hat. So those of you not watching the video don't see this. Neil has 1 million sports hats, most of which we can view in his background. And today, he's wearing the Bills hat. So tell us about it.
Well, I just, a few of my best friends are Bills fans, and I just want them to get one. I think them surviving that Jacksonville game, I kind of circled that, and I'm sure you guys talked about this last week as well, as being like a game between two teams that probably should have been meeting like later in the playoffs than the wild card round. And so the survival of that is almost sort of like a test. It's like a natural selection process, I feel like, where you get through that one. It's certainly not going to be easy from there, and there's plenty left to do. But it almost gets weirdly less stressful, I feel, once you get that out of the way and you're kind of on equal footing. Like now every team has to play the same number of games and win the same number of games going forward to win the championship. And I kind of think Denver, like of all the different teams that the Bills could have drawn coming in, they got the tough one with Jacksonville, but now Denver, and I'm curious what you guys are thinking on them, but they feel a little bit more like the paper tiger in an AFC where it's really wide open. Anybody really at this point, you could envision them winning, but to be the number one seed in that kind of conference is not necessarily really a ringing endorsement the way it would be. And I wrote about this in my takeaways. Home field, in general, home field was down this year in the past couple of years versus what we kind of think of as being like, 2.5 points per game. It's not quite that high anymore. And there have been years where it was lower for sure. I think about the COVID year, which really across all sports exposed how valuable it was to have those fans in the stands. But in the wild card, the road teams went 2-4. They had a -3 point per game differential. Some of that was because what we were just talking about, the division winners in Carolina and Pittsburgh getting those home games, they were kind of plainly like the worst division winner is always going to be worse than the best wildcard team. And so they were underdogs and they got beat. Carolina, to their credit, actually kept it a lot closer than I thought they were going to against the Rams. But that played a little bit of a role, and but I even adjusted for what we would expect the road teams to do, and it was still one of the worst performances by home teams in a wild card round since the merger, I want to say, which is again, not the worst. It's not historic, and some of that was a little bit less bad than you would expect based on who was playing. But it just tells me again, like playing at home, not necessarily really the huge boost that we have come to think of it as being over the years.
Is the fourth actually historically is the 4th seed usually an underdog compared to the 5 seed? You'd kind of think
I
it
don't
almost
know, but I think their quality, just if they were playing in a neutral site, I think almost always they would be worse.
Like I feel like the 5 seed almost always has a better record than the 4 seed.
Yeah,
because it's easier to beat 3 other teams than it is to beat however many non-division winners there are in the conference out.
So is anyone here a Denver or Bo Nix believer? Looking at Massey Peabody rankings through last week, so Denver sat out anyway, so it shouldn't matter. But we had them like 9th in the league, and there's a lot of smashing up there together. There's not that much separation, but 9th is weird for the number one seed in the AFC, right?
Well, they won so many close games. I expect that that's probably part of it. They got a little bit of that 2024 Chiefs syndrome, where it's like, how much they keep winning, but how much do we really believe in them going forward? So I think that's probably playing into it.
I'll tell you what I am a fan of.
Eric.
I'm a fan of Sean Payton. And I think if anyone can figure out a way, I think Buffalo is the better team in that game. I would much rather have Josh Allen than Bo Nix. It's not even, I don't even want to talk about the same planet here. But I just have a feeling that's the game I know everyone's saying. I think you even used the word, Neil, maybe paper tiger or whatever it is. I just think Denver's going to figure out a way to win that game. And if they do, most of that credit, and I want Buffalo to win the game. Let me just be clear. I give most of the credit to Sean Payton because I don't think they have a great offensive team. I think Sean Payton's going to figure out a way to win that game. I think he's going to potentially win, maybe using Adi's words. When it comes down to the key moment of the game, who do I trust more as a coach, Sean Payton, or do I trust, was it McDermott? Is that the coach of the Bills? Who do I trust more? I trust Sean Payton.
And I also think defense is, I view this, very much through a lens colored by what could hurt Drake May in the playoffs, my golden boy. And what scares me is Denver Broncos' defense, Houston Texans. Basically, I think pass rush is the way, that's the way I talk myself into Denver, being able. I do think the Bills are a bigger challenge actually to Denver than whoever comes out of the Pats versus Texans. But I think both the Texans and Broncos have these very, very good defenses. And I know it's not predictive, season to season, game to game and the same, but I do think it can carry a team in the playoffs, and we've seen it before.
Let me ask you, given what you saw yesterday, how do you feel about Houston, New England? Like, is there anything to learn, Neil, from the 30-3 thrashing of the Steelers? Is there anything to learn from New England playing so well, not offensively particularly? They didn't play well offensively, but defensively. Like, I asked the same thing last week. How much do you Bayesianly update your beliefs about these team strengths, given what you observed in these playoff games? Anything more than a regular season game, or no? It's a game's a game, and there it is.
Well, I think there's the recency factor. I have something in my model on my Substack that weights more recent games more, except for week 18, where we filter out those pesky games where they're not playing starters. But so I think that matters, just saying like what kind of form is a team in now. I think if you're going to try your hardest and kind of show your best level of yourself, you're going to do that in the playoffs. But to those games, I think point differential might be a little misleading about the Texans-Steelers game, because that was a 9-7 game going into the fourth quarter. It was sort of, a little scary for Houston until Aaron Rodgers turned into a pumpkin in front of us. He's had an amazing career, but that was definitely
Neil, wasn't his fault. Wasn't his fault. That receiver went the wrong way.
Yeah, it's just what was kind of a disastrous ending there, and they kind of ran up the score at the end. So I don't know that I would kind of classify that as being different in kind than the Patriots. Their offense was really, not as good as we've seen it be, certainly, but the defense was amazing, and they really shut down Herbert. How much of that was also like, if they're going to get the pass rush in there against the Chargers, like what team would be better and what quarterback in Herbert would be better to be able to kind of unleash the pass rush against? So that could have also been matchups. We kind of hinted at this earlier when we were talking about the meaning of the best team, how much you take away from certain games. The matchups seem to be also as important as sort of the overall quality of the teams from like a power rating perspective when we're talking about who wins and loses these playoff games.
When I updated my Bayesian posterior after watching the Patriots game, I noted it was heavily updated by the fact that Drake made sacked 5 times. We lost a little sight of it because the Patriots were doing even more to Herbert, but Drake May was sacked 5 times, 2 fumbles. That's against the Chargers, and now they're going up against the Texans, which have the best pass rush, I think, in all of football. Neil, you could probably give more sophisticated insight than that. But
that sounds right to me.
Well, the Texans and Broncos, the Bills are like scarily the worst defense the Patriots kind of left that the Patriots would face on that side. So yeah, I was cheering hard for the Steelers as much as that it's hard to do
Yeah,
kind of based on historical reasons. I was cheering hard for the Steelers last night. Too bad.
bet you were. Just noting that the Texans are an underdog. They're going to New England, of course, but they're a 3-point underdog. The way y'all are talking about it, you're making a good case for that not being the case. Adi was trying to get in earlier.
Yeah, I just Eric said something that I wanted to react to about Sean Payton. This is an interesting question. We all have our opinions about coaches and their ability to win. Is there a data analytical tool in football that allows us to measure the quality of a coach? Obviously not very accurately, but at least as with some reasonable expectation. I mean, you're the king of the metrics, right? So what do we got out there for coaches? Anything?
Well, I mean, certainly the stuff around decision making in particular moments, I think you can go through and kind of say like how often have coaches made the optimal decision, how much have they helped or hurt their team going for it.
We do fourth downs, of course, but beyond that, how about others?
So,
I mean,
some of it is also like the tactical stuff. I know that PFF, like all of the kind of X's and O's measures that we have, football is very interesting. I was even looking at this in the context of Justin Herbert, where they were saying, analytics nerds can't shield Justin Herbert from criticism after this loss or whatever. And I was like, well, who are the analytics nerds that are sort of supporting Justin Herbert? It's really more of the kind of tape grinder types, which I think have become synonymous with analytics nerds in football, but only football. And I find that, I mean, that's way beyond the scope of this conversation, but I find that endlessly interesting. That in every other sport, the people that use numbers, and yes, we watch games, but we don't have that trained expertise of the kind of watching tape, are the analytics nerds. And then in football, somehow the people that watch the tape religiously, more so than even relying on the numbers, are regarded as the kind of nerds du jour of the sport. So they would have things to say about, tactically what coaches are doing in particular situations, maybe on defense in ways that the numbers are kind of blind to. Famously, football, very difficult to quantify. And only over the course of, a large sample can we really get a sense of coaches that bring maybe a certain amount of stability or kind of improve their team's chances in some small amount. And it's very ironic that we saw two of the best at that, John Harbaugh and Mike Tomlin, leaving their teams, over this offseason, whether by choice or by non-choice. So I think that that's really interesting that coaching in the NFL is so opaque, even to the people making the decisions, that you can have a coach who is currently regarded as one of the best coaches. You can fire that coach or let them go. They will immediately become the most sought after coach, to the point that if it was a blind resume, you would hire that coach for your open position despite just firing that coach. And so it's just a very interesting decision process, because we're all trying to make these decisions about ultimately people that are leading 53 plus people, and even larger groups than that if you include the assistant coaches and the support staff. And they're doing it in 17 game increments, and a lot can happen. Most of those games are decided by one score or less, increasingly so. And we're trying to make sweeping judgments about their performance in the context of what are ultimately pretty small samples to act off of.
A lot of people want to get in. No new questions, just observations, riffing on this thing that we've just been talking about. Eric.
Yeah. So what would be wrong, Neil, with doing the following? Like, let's imagine we treat each game obviously as two teams playing, so a paired comparison model, right? And so whether you do something more sophisticated, you may have offensive, defensive, team strengths, whatever you want to put in there. Why not? Why can't you just put in a coaching dummy variable? You observe a large number of games. In some sense, you'll get some sort of statistically shrunken residual estimate that can be attributed to the coach of the game. And there you get an estimate. You would get on a line. Let's say right now you could put all the coaches on a line. There you go. What would be wrong with that?
Attributing the entire team effect to the coach? Your estimate.
Well, that's so. All right, so that might be one problem.
You're estimating. It sounds like you're estimating.
But let me just say it. So the answer is, at the moment, yes, but I haven't told you also what I'm going to condition on. I'm conditioning on offensive team strength, defensive team strength.
Okay, but now you're making the opposite problem, which is you're some of the coaching value is going to show up in
Those aren't
things.
aren't those exogenous?
Well, you could have variables for individual players, for instance, like the starting quarterback or, other key players. And it's the Brady Belichick problem, right?
Well, I
of
was
trying
going to say, even
disentangle-
there, you don't have, you can't get them. The two indicators are like hopelessly confounded.
Well,
yeah, and I think the biggest problem there, you could totally do that, Eric. I actually, I don't have a problem with that, but I think it would be, if you're doing shrinkage, most coaches would be shrunk down to basically zero, and the sample size that it would take to kind of distinguish them is probably well longer than the average coach's tenure, and so you end up with basically this selection effect as well, where like the only coaches that we would have any sense of whether they were actually good or not are the ones who are allowed to keep coaching long enough, which then biases it toward being the best coaches anyway.
And so my view is, just my own personal view is, I'm okay with that. Like, in the sense of, that is what we can say. We can say something about that. As you said, great coaches get to stay longer. Successful coaches get to stay longer. There's other big mass of coaches that we can't really distinguish from zero. And that's our jobs as statisticians. We're going to tell the public, like, I'll make it up. You think, I don't know, pick D'Amico Ryans. By the way, right now seems pretty good. He's won more playoff games than a lot of coaches that already, but we don't have enough evidence to say D'Amico Ryans right now is a great coach. He might be, but it's hard to know. I think that's an accurate reflection of uncertainty, is my only comment.
That'd be great, right? That's a service, actually, but it also reflects the limits of our models. And one question is, it's like those old, essays people do every now and then, like they ask scientists, what do you believe that you can't prove? It's like, you can't publish this stuff, but like, given the chance to opine, who would you say is a good coach, even though you don't have the data? One of the problems is that there's so many different elements of coaching that contribute, and they're not necessarily related. So guys, Eric asked for a study. I'll give you a study. This is a athletic study. So their quant these days is Austin Mock. And he looked at fourth down decisions this season by the coaches with teams in the playoffs, and asked how often the decision the coach made matches the decision of some model, presumably the athletics model. So the sample sizes are small. They must have conditioned to a small group of fourth down decisions, but they range from like 12 to 25. So we can kind of dismiss it on that ground alone. But then he ranks the coaches top to bottom. And D'Amico Ryans, who I just heard lauded here, is third from bottom. By the way, Jim Harbaugh, bottom. Tomlin, next to bottom. I think we knew that one. D'Amico Ryans, third from bottom. Who's the top? Matt LaFleur, who just got roasted for his second half management, right? Nick Sirianni, who's out. Vrabel, right. Shane's new favorite guy. Vrabel, number 3. So that's just one dimension. And coaches contribute across many, many, many dimensions.
By the way,
it's
just
really
to your
to
point, just to build on what you're saying, Cade, and it was the same sort of criticism Shane just made of me. It's not a criticism. I think the Brill-Weiner model, if that's what you guys call it, by the way, would say that right-wrong is not even the right metric. If it's 51-49 and someone chooses the 51, like, I'm going to say, yeah, you made the right decision or you made the wrong decision. Why don't we use those probabilities and add those up in some way?
Yeah, they don't do it right. The analysis that we showed is the vast majority of fourth down decisions are either obvious, and they generally exclude those, or, and this is a good, indeterminate, as in we don't have enough data to know the right move. So if you do that, generally in a game, you don't really have too many across even a season of really tough. I say tough calls, decisions that the coach made that were really obviously wrong, right? And then you have to throw in the level of costly, because one of the things that we discovered was that there are lots of decisions that are obviously wrong in the first quarter, but they don't cost you that much, because bad fourth down decisions in the first quarter aren't going to throw the game by 10%. They're a little bit, because the game has barely started. So whatever the bad decision but they're knowable and they're measurable. So in other words, you could cost yourself 1.5% of win probability with a uncertainty that's minimus. We know that's the right move and you blew it, but it didn't cost you that much. And most of the people who go through this, they don't look at that effect size. And that, of course, is very
sure.
dependent on the quarter that you're making that bad decision. Fourth quarter bad decisions are horrendous because they're levered.
Okay. Let's just wrap this conversation by going back to Eric and asking, okay, then what is it about Sean Payton, Eric? Is it the academic essay? What do you believe that you can't prove, or is there something specific about his coaching that
Why do you like
that
him?
gives you confidence in him?
Yeah, I just have, I'll look at this. I'll actually do the analysis off air. I'll post it on @WMoneyball. I just have a sense if one used, whether it's Massey Peabody, PFF, could be Neil's prediction model, that Sean Payton's teams over a long period of time, if we computed residual wins, I would think he's going to have a significant number of residual wins. Above and beyond, if I looked at that histogram of residual wins divided by, I'll norm it by the sample size. So it's the residual wins per game played, that I think Sean Payton would be out in the right tail of that distribution.
Yeah, and I mean, this one we actually can fit because you did need to throw in Drew Brees as an indicator, and we do actually have separation because Drew Brees played a few years in San Diego, right? And so you could try and separate out. Like, I'm just, just kind of thinking about this model here. Again, one of the things you probably want to condition on is quarterback. And for so much of Sean Payton's very successful career, he's had Drew Brees as his quarterback. And so that would be kind of, you'd have to be kind of apportioning out those wins between Drew Brees and Sean Payton. And you'd have to kind of, their relative record without each other is kind of where you'd end up separating out that partial credit. And kind of
Brees is an example of how you probably could play with heterogeneity within quarterback. I don't know if anyone ever did this with Brady. I mean, Belichick, early years of Brady were not as good as the middle and late years of Brady. The late years of Brees were a negative. That was a drag on Sean Payton at the end.
It was like Tom Roethlisberger, the late years of Roethlisberger, I mean, that was a big part of Tomlin's kind of time in Pittsburgh.
Interesting. Okay. Well, why don't we're keeping Neil longer than we expected to. So why don't we wrap? And let's give Neil, give him a moment to say something about the college football between now and our next show, next Monday night. Indiana and Miami will play for the national championship in Miami. But we're looking at, what are we looking at here, guys? We're looking at a 8.5 point line. Indiana's favored by 8.5. If you listen to the pundits, Miami might as well not show up. It's ridiculous, the rhetoric around this thing. Any thoughts on this game, Neil?
Yeah, I think these types of games always tend to be closer than maybe it seems based on a team coming in. And you have to think no further back than the Miami NA championship game against Ohio State in 2002, when they had a potential to be considered the best team of all time. The Hurricanes did. And they ended up losing that game. Questionable call in overtime, but they still lost. To our point earlier, it's about who wins and loses. And so with Indiana, now the chatter is about them potentially being the best team of all time. Certainly the way they've gone through the playoffs. And I think that's kind of an interesting wrinkle that the playoff adds to these kind of GOAT conversations, because in the past, you would play your regular season, you play your conference championship, so you'd get some good teams in there, and then you play like one extra game. If it was Miami, in 2001, they played that championship game against, who was it, Nebraska, that they just absolutely destroyed. And it's just, okay, that's it. You really beat the brakes off of another good team. Here, and I looked at this last year for Ohio State, they beat the most number of good teams in a single season of any team in the history of college football. Now, they played more games than anyone else also by virtue of the expanded playoff, but it forces you to prove it over this sequence of pretty tough opponents. And what Indiana has done, I mean, they beat Oregon by 30 plus points. They beat Alabama by 30 plus points. They have kind of gone and laid waste to the teams that they have. So they blow out Miami in this one. I think you could make a case. It reminded me, so I was having this conversation the other day on Substack with someone that I was thinking about UConn a couple of years ago, where UConn had a great team. They were the defending national champs, actually. And during the regular season, it wasn't like best of all time. We wouldn't put it up there with, the greats like UCLA teams or Indiana in the 70s or whatever. But you look at what they did in the NCAA tournament, and I think they didn't have a single game that they didn't win by double digits, and they were just
That's correct.
blowing the doors off of people all tournament long. So I think we might, with the expansions of these playoffs in all the different sports, we might have like a different category where instead of saying like, okay, greatest team of all time, you could carve out a little space for like greatest team in the playoffs specifically. What was the greatest performance? And I think UConn 2024, I think it was arguably the greatest men's college basketball single tournament performance of all time, even if they weren't the greatest team across the whole season. And you could say that about Indiana as well. Now, they've had a great season in general. I know the metrics are not quite as high on them as some of the other great teams of the past, but if they end up, again, blowing out Miami in this championship game, which is possible, I don't think it's going to happen, but it could certainly happen the way that they've been doing it. You got to kind of give them their flowers as potentially being the best in these games that we've decided count a lot more, and there's more of them than ever. The greatest playoff team of all time.
That's great. It's a great.
Beware the hubris of that inevitability. Eli Manning won to stop that.
Yeah, no question. The inevitability thing is relevant this week. But I love Neil's distinction, and actually, it takes us all the way back to the beginning of our conversation between the team with the best parameter value versus the team that does the most on the field. And whenever, I just saw this. We just got this. The Twitter, Andrew Percival, our friend who does fantastic college football analytics, looked at the best teams of like the last 10 years because everyone's making this fuss about Indiana, and Indiana's like, or maybe the last 20, Indiana's like 8th. And they're almost a half a standard deviation off the top, which is, like maybe it's a 0.4. So it's like 4 or 5 points off the top. But that was the stacked era. That was the unbelievable Alabama, Georgia, 3 deep going to the NFL era. And they don't rival that. And Neil's saying, yeah, that's one question. That's the theta question, the who's got the best parameter. The different question now that we're playing these long playoffs is who does the best. And that's now it's more like March Madness, and it's a whole different standard. That's cool. Very cool. And now Indiana has a chance. Let's see. India has a chance. Neil, we should let you go. Thanks for making time for us. It's always a delight to talk to you.
Yeah, always a pleasure. Thanks for having me, guys. Love to talk football and other sports with you.
Absolutely. Neil Payne, get on his Substack. Daily Substack from Neil will cover you across a wide range of sports, giving you both good analytics and good writing. Neil Payne. That's the first half of Wharton Moneyball. Come back and join us after the break for the second half. Welcome back to Wharton Moneyball. Welcome to the second half of this week's show. Just off the phones with Neil Payne. Neil calling in from his home office in Bentonville, Arkansas. Long-time friend of the show. Probably original. He probably gets to count as the original friend of the show. He kind of helped back in the day. He goes back as far as Deion Simpkins, our associate producer, goes back. Talking mostly NFL, a little bit of college football with Neil. Good stuff, as usual. Gentlemen, why don't we take the moment? We've got 15, 20 minutes here. Curious what you guys have been thinking about. We've got the big sports. We can stay there if that's what's on your mind. We've got other sports. If that's what's on your mind, we're just before the Olympics. We're mid hockey. We're mid NBA. There's golf controversy going on. There's all kinds of stuff. So I'm curious, gentlemen, in the world of sports, what has caught your eye?
I've got a kind of a fun hockey one. I just kind of noticed I was checking out kind of the current points leaders in the NHL, and not surprisingly, Nathan McKinnon and Connor McDavid are number 1, number 2. They're currently tied, both at 78 points. But if you look at plus minus, which is something people commonly look at for comparing these two, McKinnon's at plus 48, Connor McDavid's at plus 2.
Wow.
Yeah.
Now, hold on. Is that
he's tied for the league lead in points, but his plus minus is barely above 0.
But maybe Edmonton sucks. Maybe their defense sucks. Maybe it's his line mates.
Yes. No, I mean, I think it's such a nice, stark illustration of kind of the problems with just looking at some aggregate thing like plus minus, where you're not adjusting for the kind of context of what the players are doing with. And in his case, he's an incredible goal scorer on a porous team that allows a ton of goals too. So he's on the ice for a lot of goals. And I mean, he does bear some responsibility to that, but trying to parcel that out. That's why you need to adjust these types of things. I just think I thought it was kind of a cool comparison between those two.
It's a great example, Shane. I used to think that hockey plus minus was this great measure, and then I was going to use it for something, and I wrote Namita, our old friend Namita Nandakumar, who's a student of Shane's, and then has gone on, was with the Eagles briefly, and has been with the Kraken since their beginning. Yep. So the Kraken a year before they even started. So Namita's like, don't do anything with this. It's like, you need the sample size you need is more or less what she said. The sample size you need to say anything about plus minus at the individual level is in the multiple seasons. You can't begin to do something with it. So you've given us a great illustration of that. What else, gentlemen? Adi, Eric.
So I obviously am a huge tennis fan. That Australian Open's coming up. I would be surprised if, like, I'm trying to decide at this point, would I take Sinner against the field? I know I would take Sinner and Alcaraz against the field easily on the men's side. The women's side, it's hard to know. I mean, Sabalenka's having such a great start to the season and is such a strong player, but the women's game has proven that, I forget, there was one stretch of like 4 straight years where there were literally 16 different Grand Slam champions. So I think that's hard to do on the women's side. But I think it would be hard to find any legitimate betting odds, any, that wouldn't say, matter of fact, I'd have to give you odds if I took Sinner and Alcaraz and you got the field.
Oh, yeah, that's not interesting. The Sinner thing, though, is interesting. Like, Duck, what do you think peak odds were among the big three? Like, any given Grand Slam, what was the peak any one of them had?
Nadal at the French.
And it's
not close. And
but how high did that get?
Is this kind of peak for a single person?
That's what I'm asking.
Like kind of over. I mean, because obviously the big three kind of suck from each other.
Okay, so you want to go back to like the Borg, McEnroe,
or like Sampras. I don't know. Winning Wimbledon's or something. I don't. I mean, that would. Interesting empirical question. I do kind of feel like, I mean, there's the Australian that won like everything in the 50s.
Laver?
If you really wanted to go far back.
So, but Eric's introducing this interesting threshold. Has anybody ever crossed the, odds-on favorite threshold? A single player in a professional Grand Slam,
It's crazy to think in like a 4-round tournament that you would ever get to that point, to be honest.
Right. Is it only 4 rounds? I thought it was like 6.
7 rounds.
Sorry,
seven.
Yeah, I guess maybe relevant rounds, probabilistically relevant rounds. I mean, if you can,
like 3.7. All right, Eric's working with his friend ChatGPT to answer our question, but while he's doing that,
can answer.
The old days when we just made it up.
No, this question.
Should I do a caught my eye before we rate?
No. Eric's got the answer, I think.
No, I don't have it yet, but it's looking.
Okay.
But I'm predicting it's going to be Nadal at the French in some time where Djokovic wasn't as great yet on clay. But Federer
what did it hit?
Was never great. I'm going to guess Nadal in 2016 or 17 on clay.
But what was the max probability pre-tournament
I'm going to guess 60%.
Oh, my goodness. Well into odds-on favorite. Interesting. Okay.
All right. Nadal and French over those years.
Hey, by the way, Eric, on the tennis front.
By the way, as it's doing thinking, by the way, in 2006, it just said Federer was minus 250 at Wimbledon.
What? Really? That's incredible.
Did he win?
Would not have.
It's now checking Wimbledon. It's checking Borg.
No, that's not tax poor ChatGPT.
It's checking Borg 1980 at Wimbledon. Remember, he was the 4-time defending champion at that point. So it's checking that. So, well, let me say, regardless of whether it finds the maximum or the minimum, however you want to phrase it, we have now evidence of someone that's been 62.5, something like that, minus 250.
Yeah. That's impressive. That's a good thing to know about. I would not have known. By the way, I haven't read the article yet, but a friend sent it. The New Yorker has a big article on Alcaraz and Sinner, the budding rivalry of Carlos Alcaraz and Jannik Sinner. Sounds like it might be interesting reading. Adi Wyner, what caught your eye, bud?
All right. Well, actually, I was in Puerto Rico celebrating my wife's big birthday with the family, so I didn't watch very much sports. It was a terrible time to go. We were in the air while the Eagles were playing. In fact, we flew into Philadelphia Airport watching the end of the game, and And we had news blackout. I predicted. I didn't expect them to win, but that was not what caught my eye. What catches my eye is that January 20th is coming up, and Eric knows that that's the date the announcement of the Hall of Fame. So before we have next show, so we should make some forecasts, guys. We always do this. Who's going to get in?
It's gonna be on. It'll be the day of our recording next week, the 20th.
Could be after or before. I'm not sure when they're going to.
Okay.
It's after. It's usually what, 7 p.m., between 6 and 7 p.m. on the MLB network.
All right,
Okay.
so that gives us some time to research it. So I'll just give you a rundown, and we'll make our predictions.
Wait, is there any uncertainty, Adi? Isn't it Carlos Beltran and Andrew Jones and no one else?
So Beltran is going to make it easy.
Guy here, come on,
Andrew Jones, he's around 83%, and you could have a substantial fallback or between the publicly announced ballots and what actually happens. But I think Jones is going to make it. So those are the two obvious ones. I don't think anyone else is going to make it. What's actually interesting is where the rest of them are going to lie, right? So the big jumps this year were really surprising. Chase Utley is pushing 70 right now. So he's only in his third year. That I'd have to forecast he's going to be a Hall of Famer before this is out.
He will be for sure.
And you'd argue that he has to be as well. Here's another one that surprised me because I thought, his final tally last year was in the 20s. Right now, Pettit is approaching 60%. Andy Pettit thought that is a surprise, and he's in his 8th. Will he make it or not? No, certainly not this year. There's nobody else is anywhere close to just the Beltran and Jones, which may be the reason why some of the other guys are bumping up. Is because there's just not that many.
Yeah, I guess it could be both a light year, just specifically this year. It could also be, maybe we have to start reappraising starting pitchers, and maybe like somebody like Adi Pettit's career looks extra. I think like maybe it's like as the starting pitcher kind of dies out as an entity, like maybe there's some kind of a renewed appreciation from some of for some of the recent starters that were on the margins.
But here's that of all the first time ballot people, none of them is going to stay.
What does it take to stay?
5%,
I think.
Remind us what the first time.
Oh, interesting.
So there's nobody who came up this year who of really any substantial quality.
Yeah.
And that makes it was kind of wide open. So the group is Ryan Braun, Sinshu Chu, Edwin Carnacion, Gonzalez, Alex Gordon, Cole Hamels. Cole Hamels is up. Sorry, I missed that. He's going to stay.
I was going to say Cole Hamels will probably get.
Cole Hamels is going to stay. I missed him.
What's the base rate of staying? What's the base rate of first-year guys sticking around?
That's a great question. I don't know the answer. I would imagine it's higher than this 1 out of 15 right this year. It's probably.
What does it do to get? What do you have to do to qualify?
Yeah, I was going to say that we need to know more about the selection process of how the builds. Is it something where they just somebody's added to the ballot?
It's 10 years. I believe it's 10 years.
Yeah, so there's a time eligibility, but there's a lot more players.
It's not a deterministic process that gets you on the ballot, right? It's like some kind of opaque selection.
Committee nominates.
I don't know. Rick Porcello's on it. He's got no votes.
No, but it's a good question. I don't actually know how someone gets on the ballot. I know how long they stay on the ballot. I know how the maximum time, but how they get there. By the way,
they should
has given me the answer, and I was correct.
One second, Eric. Stay with this for just a quick sec. They should contract with people like Adi who have models for who's going to win, and it's just higher in the funnel. It's earlier in the pipeline. The same model would be great for nominating players, right? You could argue, we don't know what the consideration set was, but maybe they did a bad job of nominating players this year, if only one. I don't know. You could quantify that process if you wanted to through Adi's models. Okay, Eric was going to answer his.
It was extremely close. It's Nadal at the 2018 French Open. He was minus 255, which has an implied odds of 71.8%. Then Nadal at the 2010 French, Federer at the 2006 Australian, and Federer at the 2007 Wimbledon were all minus 250.
I would never have thought that a single player. I would never. I was so wrong on that. That's amazing. Okay. All right. So let's. Do you know Center's market odds right now for the Australian?
I can
You
find
can
that
come
very
up with that?
quickly.
All right. When does the tournament start, Eric?
It starts, I think it's got to be next week. He's minus, well, I mean, I know there's the VIG in it, but he's minus 110.
Okay, so he's right at it. Right at it.
He's
All
right at it.
All right. So has the Australian gained uh, respect in recent time? Is it
No.
dropped respect? I mean, when did it become the fourth major, and why does it get to be the fourth major? It feels
I think
like
it's been the fourth major since about 1970s, the 70s. But you understand, like, I think if you look at, it's another thing you could say is impressive about the, you know, it's hard to compare across eras. Like, most of the great players in the 70s didn't play the Australia. And
Okay.
so, like, I don't remember how many times McEnroe played it, but let's say he was a professional for 15 years. I'm making that up, age 18 to 32, 33. I'm guessing he played it no more than 4 times, 5 times. So I think there's a deflation of these guys who have like 7 to 10 majors. I'm not saying they'd be up at the big 3, but you wouldn't surprise me if they were in the closer to the 10 to 14 bracket had they played most of the majors. And I think it's also true for the women on the women's side as well. You know, you have Chris Everett and Navratilova with 18 majors. I have to look at Steffi Graf, who's got like 22 or 23. I'm not convinced she played the Australian that long. And by the way, she
Wow.
retired at like age 32 also.
That's interesting. That's
Yeah, where did we
interesting.
decide along the way that there was 4 majors in tennis and 4 majors in golf? Because it's kind of a
Right.
weak one in both sets.
Right. And now there are claims.
Or
Now there
a-
are claims for
or
the.
a clear there's a clear 4th one in either
But
set.
why is 4 the side? You would have thought. I mean, everything else is in 3s. Why are those in
like
4s?
why are there 4 majors? Historically, it's I fascinating.
All right, guys. Let me give
Also,
you.
yeah, I want to go back to what also you talked about with Neil Payne. I really don't think, I mean, I hope I'm wrong because I want to see a competitive game. I don't think Miami should show up. Like, I really think, like, I find it hard to argue that they're a stronger team than Oregon or Alabama. I'm
Well,
not saying on any given day. I'm
So-
just saying, let's go back to what we talked about with Neil. If I think, I'm just going to make the following statement. If Indiana played 1,000 memoryless games against Oregon, Alabama, Miami, I think the spread would be the highest against Miami.
Yeah, possible. Now, what's different here is if Carson Beck, I mean, I'm just going to tell some stories, all right? They're just stories, and we should short these stories in general. But Carson Beck is a 7th-year quarterback. He was quite good in his 5th year. He was good enough in his 5th year to be offered a $4 million contract to go play a 6th year. And now he's in his 7th year. And he's playing what looks to be some of his best football. Miami is, so that's something that seems to have changed over time. Everybody recognizes they have great line play. Mario Cristobal is known for his emphasis on line play, and it allows them to do some things some colleges just can't do. They can just move. They don't lose yardage, for example. I think probably have the lowest number of tackles for loss on the offensive side of anybody in the NCAA, and they're disruptive on the defensive line. So they've got athletes at receiver. So you can tell a story, but it's gonna depend on Beck really being a good Carson Beck and those guys being real disruptive on the front lines. You know, anytime sports starts being talked about as inevitably as the Hoosiers have been talked about, and I mean, you couldn't even listen to that game the other night. I mean, it's like they've turned this Cinderella into the New York Yankees. It's like they've somehow now we're pulling against Indiana. They've done that. The media has done that to us in about 15 seconds because they're making it so inevitable. I have no flavor and taste at all for the Miami Hurricanes, but I think it'd be kind of fun if they went up there and upset the Hoosiers. Okay, let me related to college football. Let me give you what caught my eye. And y'all probably don't know what's going on in the portal right now. This is the second full year of portal. They've limited the number of portal windows to 1, so we're in the portal window. It's a 2-week window. The guys playing the championship have a few extra days when the championship game is over. But here's the main portal window: 2 weeks. How many players do you think the teams that are losing the most players are losing? on an 85 scholarship team, what do you think? How many players do you think have been announced, join the portal for the team who's lost the most players?
10, 15?
I was going to guess slightly higher, but 15 to 20. But Shane's number doesn't bother me
I mean,
either.
I'm making that out really out of thin air, but I think that's the exercise anyway, right?
What did you say, Shane?
I'm making that completely up, but that's
What'd you say?
10 to 15. Sorry.
Okay, guys, I may have never asked a question of you that you're more wrong on than this. D2. Oklahoma State, who lost their coach, 62 of the 85 players. Now, Iowa State, their coach goes to Penn State. How many of their players left? 9. Go down to teams. Now, here's the thing. That's unbelievable. Maybe it's not surprising since they lost their coaches. Here's what's new this year. The blue blood teams that have stacked years of 5-star recruits that have been crushing high school recruiting rankings for years have these guys that are third string. They've been, they're sophomores. They're still not playing, but they're really highly recruited. They're being rated. Ohio State has lost 29 players. Ohio State, 29 players. Notre Dame, 29 players. Texas, more than 20 players. It's a whole new world. Like we're watching college football change right in front of us this month with the portal. It's a whole new world. It's going to change high school recruiting. It's going to change the number of scholarships these teams offer. They're not going to keep 105 players because they can't pay 105 players. So they're going to have smaller rosters. They're flat out they have to let some guys go because they can't keep up with BYU wants to hire, they want to get somebody, or Kansas State wants to get somebody, and they can't. It is transformational.
So Cade, what to you is the implications of that for, I'll call it, I mean, obviously it's don't count on anyone being there a second year, which means like maybe you should do a pulsing strategy, which I'm making a number up. Let's say you have 20 million to spend on recruits. Maybe you should spend 40 million, 0, 40 million, 0, because you might as well try to maximize years that have a down year, et cetera, et cetera.
Well, ironically, people are doing just the opposite. Historically, when we were growing up, the teams that won national championships were senior heavy teams. And then they would all graduate and they'd go through this cycle. It was cyclical. And then about 20 years ago, 15 years ago, the Alabamas of the world figured out a way to like stack talent and not ever have the rebuild. They just quit having rebuild years. And now with the portal, teams feel like they can always just go get, they lose their best quarterback, they'll go get the next best quarterback on the market. And so I think it's kind of the psychology is the opposite of that, Eric. Like we never have to rebuild. We'll just go buy a new team.
You're not.
But I mean, they have to compete with people. So we'll see. I mean, everybody can't buy a new team. It doesn't work for everybody. I'm sorry, Shane. Go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, like, if you did this kind of calculation of a mobility, like conditioning more on like the top, like the start, they say the top 50 on a team or something like that. Because you said it was like the number of scholarships they give out. So I don't know how many of these are getting into like kind of the third stringer. Like, is this mostly third stringers moving around? Or is it like obviously there's a lot more fluidity in the market, but like how much of the top talent is kind of moving around?
Top talent moves, but what's different this year is that top talent hasn't historically left the top teams. In fact, talent they've let their bottom people go and they've retracted. But this year, for the first time, teams are getting rated the first year and second year players who are still on the bench, but they're the future of the team. They're the high school recruits that won the high school recruiting classes. They're the guys we're excited about. They're being poached, and that's a whole new thing. It's a whole new world. The equilibrium here is not obvious. The optimization isn't obvious, and they're having to try to figure it out real time.
So what does it mean in terms of why would you give someone a lot of money in an NIL deal or whatever deal that payment is for a freshman who's going to sit because he's not good enough to start yet? And
he's going to go to he's going to go to BYU and start. He wouldn't have started at Notre Dame.
I see.
But he's going to go start at a team that's lesser. That's
an analogy. It sounds like we're dividing college sports into AAA, AA, and single A, and you're going to move up the way you're doing it. The way they do.
That's what we thought. That's what we thought at this year's challenge.
Well, with the fluidity to move between organizations, which is not something you have in baseball.
Well, but Indiana, Texas Tech, BYU, they're showing us that money can level the playing field, and one way to get there faster is to go steal guys that aren't yet on the field for these other teams. And they do other things as well. They compete for talent everywhere, but this particular dynamic is new.
That's how Indiana got where it is, right? I mean, we talked about.
Let me explain. Help me explain this. If you get someone who's like a top 4-star recruit and offensive lineman, not going to be able to start for the best teams, aren't they likely now to go to a weaker team, not going to compete for a championship team, but will get a lot of money and will play, and then his second year will move up to a better team for probably more money, but likely to start, and then maybe their third or fourth year go to a competitive team and then get the most money. That sounds to me like it's single A, double A, triple A.
More teams are competitive, viable than they used to be. So when Indiana's playing for the national championship and Texas Tech was in the final 8, you've just got you've got dozens of teams that could do it.
Cade, can teams not sign players to multi-year NIL enforceable contracts?
I don't know the answer definitively. That's ask enough that we believe the answer is no, not enforceable. Because if they could, they would, and you don't see it.
Right. Okay.
And something you are seeing now. So Texas Tech got the top quarterback by most people's account. The Cincinnati quarterback went to Texas Tech, and my understanding is he had a clause in his contract that if another team signed him, they had to pay like $1 million to Cincinnati, and I believe Tech had to honor that and paid them. And now, what does that feel like? That feels like world soccer. That feels like transfer payment. That's a freaking transfer fee. Yep. So that may be the world that we get into. So it's a different way of enforcing it, right, Eric? It's not that the player's accountable. It's that the guy who hires them has to pay the team. Right. Maybe that's the world we're going to be in.
Yeah, and obviously if you make that fee large enough, then people aren't going to transfer in a multi-year way. There is a cost by which you wouldn't pay it.
There is.
They won't take you. But they won't be able to give you money. They can get you to come and play for the team, but they won't be able to pay you. Right? How can the player not be able to transfer a school?
No, the player can.
Absolutely. Yeah.
He just have to. He's restricted. We'll find out whether those kind of contracts will stand up in court. But let me tell you, from a fan's perspective, it's rough to have this much turnover. I mean, college football historically, you hear about the guys when they're in high school being recruited. You look forward to seeing them like play it when games are out of control. You get to see that guy play when he's young, and then you watch him grow into a player, and that's just being blown up right now, just completely.
I think it's. Don't you think that has tremendous potential to be incredibly detrimental to the sport?
Yes, I mean it's yes. Everyone kind of knows it's out of. What's that, Shane?
Did they say that too? And free agency came into baseball.
Yeah, that's a fair question. And it's like, will the fans really lose interest? And can coaches? I mean, coaches now have to recruit their entire roster again every year. Like every year, they not only are recruiting people to come in, they have to re-recruit their own players, and they have to decide which players to let go. I cannot imagine the job of these coaches. Okay.
How long do you think it'll take, just quickly on the same topic, how long do you think it'll take for us to assess your point earlier, Cade, that maybe this is leading to a good outcome at the team level, that there's more of a opportunity, a distribution of teams that can win? And maybe, and the other related question to me is, with people changing around all the time, will this affect early performance in the NFL, because players have now played under a bunch of different systems? They're not thinking about the NFL as their object. They are, but they can make so much money in college that maybe they can sacrifice. I'm just wondering when we'll be able to make a statement other than we don't know on those two issues.
Well, two very different issues, of course. I think unquestionably the first one is true, that we have more parity now than we've had in a long time in college football.
That's great.
That has to be a great thing. Indiana, Texas Tech, Miami in there for the first time in forever. I mean, everyone recognizes that's a good thing. That second question, I thought you were going to go a different direction, was like, does this hurt play? Like early season going to be a little rougher because everybody's on a new team. But you went a different direction, which is, how does this affect NFL prep? No question that some players are sticking around longer because of that contract that's available now. Some players do better with their 5th or 6th year of college instead of going to pros. And so maybe that leaves some of those guys better developed for the NFL, but also it could be that mostly those are guys that aren't going to have much of an NFL
I'll be
career
interested to
anyway.
see when, since many of us have connections with teams, do teams start using measures of how variable someone's, whether it's coaching staff, how many teams they've played for, et cetera, in their predictive models? I'm sure they do. I would just be interested to see what those predictive models say about someone's NFL performance as a function of how many different teams they've been on, the size of their NIL contracts, et cetera, et cetera.
Well, you have an interesting intuition here that working under different systems, multiple systems, is good for your learning, and learning is a trait that people want. That's an interesting intuition. Okay, fellas, why don't we wrap it there? Remember, we do have between now and the next show the quarterfinals in the NFL and the finals in college football and the Hall of Fame announcement 1 week from today. All right, guys, why don't we let it go? Thanks for the full show for the whole crew here. On behalf of Eric Bradlow, Adi Wyner, Shane Jensen, for Deion Simpkins, the boss man, keeping us on track, Marissa Reyna, our producer, Dee Patel, the boss lady. Appreciate you guys. Thanks y'all for listening. Come back and join us next time. Between now and then, enjoy your sports.